This is CBC Vancouver News.
This will be province-wide policy.
Goodbye single-family zoning, the push by the province to get more housing built, and concerns about infrastructure.
Kids that are hungry don't seem to concentrate very well, and they really need food.
More money for school food programs in our province, but why is Canada behind other wealthy countries?
Devastating time for us, but thankful for the opportunity.
It certainly wasn't us as players who decided to not play this season.
And team punted. SFU is ending its long-running football program.
We're going to fight for our team and our program.
But alumni say, not so fast. Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. BC's new housing plan could spell the end of single-family zoning across the province by allowing owners to add more units. Some local leaders say it could help gently densify their neighborhoods, while others are worried about streets and plumbing. But as John Hernandez reports, researchers say it is unlikely to mean a big, sudden influx of new housing.
Single-family homes take up the bulk of urban land in Metro Vancouver while only serving a fraction of residents. Changing that is a major pillar of BC's latest housing plan.
That's going to be quite transformational.
Called Homes for People, the plan announced on Monday will allow up to 4 units on traditional single-family lots, a move that would mark the end of single-family zoning in BC communities.
This will be province-wide policy. This means no more long zoning processes just to build a duplex, a triplex, or a row home.
The prospect has some municipal leaders excited, including in Langley City, where single-family homes take up half the land, but only house 20% of residents.
About giving people housing options, but it's not, in my mind, a sneaky way of building, apartments and townhouses in single detached areas.
The strategy has already been adopted in Victoria and is currently being considered in Vancouver. But some municipal leaders fear a provincial blanket policy is an overstep. In Richmond, concerns on the impact it could have on infrastructure.
It's fine to say you want a lot more dwelling units, but do you have the sewers and the pipes and the water supplies, everything that it takes? Every time we have a rezoning, we have a traffic study.
It's common for people to assume that as soon as zoning changes, a neighborhood will rapidly be replaced by whatever's new.
But researchers say the policy doesn't translate into a sudden jolt in density. In Oregon, a similar measure went into effect in 2021 to help fight its housing crisis, but change has been gradual.
One thing we're noticing is that it's not changing things that fast. We're talking about like a couple hundred homes in the city of Portland per year. This is a city of 600,000.
Call it one tool in a big toolbox for a housing crisis with no simple fix. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
Meanwhile, the struggle of renters were put to BC's Premier tonight at a town hall in Burnaby, and many had pointed questions for David Eby. About 100 renters gathered at the Confederation Community Centre in North Burnaby, invited by advocacy groups and NDP constituency offices. David Eby says if a rental building goes up for sale, the goal is that the new owner would be a non-profit, if not have baseline protection. Others want stronger measures, though. The provincial government released its updated housing plan yesterday with billions of dollars in incentives to build and assistance for renters and owners, including a tax on house flipping. Football alumni at SFU say they are not giving up after the university announced today it is shutting down the decades-old team. Officials say they were not invited back to play in an NCAA conference next year. Players were told this morning and say they are devastated.
We're not done fighting. We're going to fight for our team and our program to hopefully get another year so the players do get another chance to show the world what they have in them.
It certainly wasn't us as players who decided to not play this season. It certainly wasn't the coaches who decided to play this season. It came from higher-ups.
SFU moved to the American-based NCAA in 2010, the only Canadian institution to do so. It moved partly to be able to offer more scholarships for athletes, but the team struggled with an 8-99 record, and officials say another U.S. school eventually wanted in on their 10-team conference.
Due to extensive travel, the border, competitiveness, they had made the decision not to renew our affiliate membership.
The shutdown hits almost 100 students. SFU says it will honor athletic scholarships and players who want to finish their academics here can do so. Incoming recruits are also being pledged help as well. Hansen says it's unlikely the program can be saved without some serious changes. She says they've asked U Sports, their former Canadian conference, if they can join again, but she's not optimistic. Still, some alumni are calling for a timeout. The SFU Football Alumni Society met tonight and say it is looking at its legal options to try to save the team. Frustration is growing in Surrey, where many property owners are angry. City Council has approved a 12.5% property tax hike. That's the highest average increase all over Metro Vancouver. And as Zara Premji explains, it's leaving some wondering how much longer they will call Surrey home.
As news spreads about the hefty tax hike, so does the frustration.
A colossal mess up.
For Ben Guman, he says he's going to feel the pinch twice, hitting his pocket as a Surrey homeowner and a business owner.
It's super concerning. We've just gotten over the COVID lockdowns and the effects that's having on businesses and homeowners.
And his concerns not his alone. Surrey community members frustrated with the back and forth over the Mounties versus Surrey police debate, which is responsible for about 1/3 of the tax hike.
I feel pathetic about it. I do not even have words about it. I do not know how to put it into the words.
Surrey councillors voted to pass the city's 5-year budget Monday night, including increasing the property tax to also cover upgrades to a number of parks as well as a new ice rink. And staff estimate the average homeowner will now be paying at least $280 more.
Members of this Surrey community are waking up to more money out of our pocket where we need it the most. Go talk to your people.
And while it's not the 17.5% hike first proposed, 12.5% is cold comfort in today's economy.
Why would you make a decision in midst of inflation, in midst of when everything is getting expensive?
Seeing sentiments echoed by the councillors who voted against this spike.
This is just going to hit them way too hard in the pocketbook. And I think we need to be, as councillors, more responsible with taxpayers' money.
Anna says the city has been known to try and keep its property tax rates low in years past, but Guman fears that's what's led to what he calls a disaster now.
There's people that are making decisions about my future that aren't going to be around long enough to have to deal with it.
Surrey City Council says now the final step is for this to be adopted on Monday, April 17th. And then if you own a property or a business in Surrey, you can expect to see that 12.5% tax hike in your next bill. Zara Premji, CBC News, Surrey.
BC will become the first province in Canada to set nurse-to-patient ratios. That move comes amid the strains of the pandemic and a shortage of family doctors amongst other staff. Mira Baines reports on how soon that could actually happen.
The new nurse-to-patient model proposed for BC helped seal a tentative deal between the BC Nurses Union and the province. These standards of nurse-to-patient ratios are already being used in Australia and California. It's a relief for nurses who have been leaving the profession due to burnout.
Now we will have a standard minimum, and based on that, we will know how much staff needs to be on each unit. Right now, because of the shortages, they are seeing increased numbers of patients, so you could have 1 nurse to 8 patients.
So what will it look like? Nurse-to-patient ratios are still being developed for community and long-term care. So far for hospitals, they're 1-to-1 for critical care patients, 1 nurse for every 2 mental health patients, 1-to-3 for specialized care patients, and 1-to-4 for palliative care patients. Health Minister Adrian Dix says the new nurse-to-patient model will help retain and recruit nurses.
This is the place in the world, but especially in North America, that nurses want to come and work.
Nurses across Canada have been lobbying for the change for 20 years, according to their national union. BC Liberal health critic MLA Shirley Bond questions how the model will work in rural communities that have been struggling with staffing shortages.
But with that needs to come the details, the resources, and a timeline so nurses, wherever they work in British Columbia, have a sense of hope about what the future looks like.
It's unclear exactly what will happen if those ratios aren't met. The tentative deal still needs to be ratified, and that could happen on April 20th. The new contract also includes more mental health supports and higher wages. Mira Baines, CBC News, Victoria.
The provincial government has now committed hundreds of millions of dollars for school food programs, one of the largest investments across the country. Right now, Canada has no universal food program, and as Belle Puri shows us, it's lagging behind other wealthy nations.
A healthy lunch is guaranteed at this high school.
Kids that are hungry don't seem to concentrate very well, and they really need food.
In its latest budget, BC's government has pledged $214 million over 3 years to create and expand school food programs.
This is the largest investment in school food program in the province's history.
This is beef and barley today.
BC leads the provinces when it comes to funding meals in schools.
To see the province kind of like doing their part and not see the federal government doing their part is quite frustrating and disappointing.
In the last federal election, the Liberal platform included a national school food policy and $1 billion over 5 years. But last week's budget made no mention of it. Schools say they're running out of money.
We're hearing from members of our coalition across the country that they really think they will maybe have to stop serving kids earlier, like in May instead of June.
In 2019, a first-of-its-kind study looked at the funding of school food programs in Canada. It found 93% of the money comes from provincial and territorial governments.
And collectively, that was serving over 1 million kids, or about 1 in 5 in Canada.
What exists is a patchwork of programs that serve breakfast, lunch, or snacks in schools to a fraction of students. Among G7 countries, Canada is the only one without a universal school food program. And experts say the majority of countries around the world have some sort of government-funded national school meal program. In Brazil, for example, the national program there feeds 47 million students at 190,000 schools each day. Canada is a long way from anything like that, leaving school food programs struggling and many students hungry. Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
Late last year, an Indigenous man froze to death in Terrace. After the break, we'll tell you the challenges of finding shelter in rural towns. Stick with us. Hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream. Nice to be back. Provinces like Ontario are touting for-profit clinics as a solution to long wait times for surgeries. But some patients say they feel taken advantage of, talked into paying for unnecessary tests and procedures, and in some cases billed for services they're not supposed to pay for. Christine Burak shows us the story of one woman who was upsold thousands of dollars.
But in the beginning, they were $300 a prescription.
Lois Cooper says a private for-profit surgery clinic in Ontario cost her plenty, including her trust.
I wouldn't have ever spoken out if I hadn't heard Premier Ford say that these private clinics won't charge you money, won't charge extra. It feels like it's my public duty to say that's not true.
In 2016, Cooper had a macular hole in her right eye, causing a dark spot at the center of her vision. Within weeks, she saw an ophthalmologist. Cooper says she had vitrectomy surgery in a warehouse-like clinic and went home with bills.
I'd been sent there by my medical professionals. So that would mean to me that this is where you should be and this is how it's done.
Cooper's vitrectomy surgery was medically necessary, which the province pays for. But before that surgery happened, she was upsold and asked to sign off on optional tests, services, and procedures. She says the surgeon later recommended equipment, referrals, and a treatment for eye floaters that failed. Then Cooper says he told her there was a mass in her other eye requiring more surgery. That's when she started asking questions.
Where is it in the eye? What layer is it in? Where is it? And he just looked at me and he said, "You can leave." And then he turned to his assistant and he said to her, he said, "Charge this appointment to OHIP." So I didn't have to pay for that appointment, but I had to pay for all the rest.
Cooper says she then went to another surgeon who told her there was no mass in her eye.
You don't have 10 years of medical training under your belt. So you're at a huge disadvantage when you're presented with information.
Data shows private for-profit clinics are overbilling and upselling Canadians for hundreds of millions of dollars.
We need to be concerned about upselling because it's the thin edge of the wedge towards extra billing, where patients are told they can only get something that's publicly covered if they pay out of pocket.
I just want people to be aware that when they go to a private clinic, make sure you ask questions. Don't sign any papers. Go there first and get all the information on what they're going to want from you, and then maybe go talk to somebody else.
Cooper says her vision is fine now. She can't figure out what purpose another surgery would have served, except profit.
Late last year, temperatures in Terrace plunged to -22. And one night before Christmas, an Indigenous man froze to death inside his tent. He was only a few kilometers from his Tsimshian reserve, Kitsimkalem. His death highlights a pressing issue. Homeless people, many of them Indigenous, looking for shelter in rural towns and cities. And as Wamish Hamilton shows us, it's leading to growing tensions.
Hi, George.
Hi, Diana.
Welcome. Welcome to our territory, the unceded territory of the Tsimshian people.
Cheers.
Thank you. Welcome to our home. We called him Dickie. Dickie was his synonymous name everybody knew him as. Not only because of his loud, infectious laugh, but his voice alone. Right. You can always hear him before you see him. Everybody said that. He always liked to protect people. He always protected me. I don't know what I'm going to do without my brother.
Terrace is a small city in northwest BC, home to about 12,000 people. This is where Dickie Nelson lived, in a tent. It's also where he died, on December 22nd, in -20-degree temperatures. He was 54. Dickie's family was surprised he'd returned here that night. The shelter says a bed was available. The Kassan Society, which runs the shelter, was reluctant to talk to us or let us speak to people staying there. We can't ever know why Dickie stayed outside, but he died while others argued about helping people like him, how to turn around years of neglect.
Let's get down to the approximately over 372 signatures that are asking the shelter not to go through.
Even before Dickie died in the cold, Kassan had been the focus of heated debate and the target of this petition, started by residents against the location of a new shelter.
I'll tell you, I'm going to protect myself and my property at all costs. These guys come into my yard and try and rip me off and steal stuff off of me so they can go buy drugs and alcohol. That's not going to fly. That's not going to fly in our little tight little neighborhood there.
After the meeting and the tension it exposed, Kassan hired a spokesperson who would only agree to a telephone interview.
The demand for shelter services and all the associated support services has been increasing consistently for years now. That being said, not everyone who is experiencing homelessness chooses to use the shelter spaces. So we don't actually have a hard number for the amount of beds that we need.
Not everybody in the community shares the same sentiment about the shelter. How are you navigating that type of tension?
Well, I mean, the tension exists.
Kassan says the new shelter is needed more than ever. It's 5 times larger and replaces their old one, but it doesn't offer drug treatment or recovery support, services some have called for.
I believe everyone deserves help and the care they need, but this type of shelter only provides a bed and food for the night. It doesn't deal with the addiction, the pain that's caused the addiction in the first place.
Homelessness is a concern across the north. Latest rates show a 12% rise, with Indigenous people being hit hardest. Paul Lagasse, in Prince Rupert, sees it firsthand.
It would be nice to say, hey, yeah, let's build this, let's put the shelter up and we'll solve the problem. But then, you know, we find ourselves having to build another shelter.
The causes of homelessness today are many: rising rents, boom and bust employment cycles, intergenerational trauma, a toxic drug crisis, the pandemic.
I will say the BC government has been very, very good in investing for our most vulnerable here in the north and terrace. But again, the expansion of homelessness has, the pool has broadened.
Terrace Mayor Sean Bouita says his city is confronting these issues, but he wants the province to do more, especially for mental health and addiction support.
And without that kind of treatment, how can we support these folks? Terrace has got one of the largest per capita First Nation population, so which in turn means that we have one of the largest per capita trauma for residential school. And it feels to me that the supports just are not there for people. And I think the way for us to move the dial is to get the Nishka, the Shimshin, the Kitsilus and Kitsum Kalim, the Teltan, the Haisla, the Haida, and the municipalities in the area, and then all go to the province and say, this issue needs to be resolved, and it needs to be resolved in the Northwest now.
The Northern First Nations Alliance is tackling this.
All of our communities are pulling together to say, look, we all share the same issues.
Arthur Renwick, who is Haisla, speaks of their joint effort. He says these issues are a terrible legacy of residential schools, among other colonial projects.
The impact has been huge, and this is the result of it. And you know, healing is really important, and that's the main thing. The main focus is for us is like, how can we heal ourselves?
Some debate the best way to help. Others build walls. Meanwhile, vulnerable people like Dickie continue to live on the margins and die alone outside.
My brother's buried in here between my father and my mother, our mother. My brother's really lucky to be with my parents. He was cold. They said, let's go home. So they took him home.
Wamish Hamilton, CBC News, Terrace.
There's a live shot of Harbour Centre with Grouse Mountain behind you. Amy Bell will have your BC-wide forecast right after this.
Vancouver may be the perfect backdrop for Clinton and Yeltsin, offering a degree of political neutrality, economic prosperity, and of course physical beauty. Those elements also make it perfect for everyone else attending the summit, the ones trying to catch a glimpse of the leaders and the ones trying to catch their attention. More from the CBC's Ian Hannamansing.
5:30 in the morning, and 10-year-old Kyle Naso is getting ready to meet two presidents. He's one of the Boy Scouts that were picked to greet Clinton and Yeltsin at the airport. And not surprisingly, his excitement has kept him from getting a good night's sleep.
Woke up about 4 times thinking it was 5 o'clock.
For most people, this is as close as they could get to the VIP visitors. About 50 people huddled in a cold rain at the summit meeting site this morning, like Deval Bowie and John Hopkins, who had hoped to catch a glimpse of Yeltsin's arrival. And that's about all they got, a quick glimpse through a limousine window.
Oh, I thought it was great. He waved, and he was a really nice guy.
I got a couple pictures. Hopefully I got one of him waving.
About 2 hours later, the crowd swelled to more than 250 people for an even briefer look at the President of the United States.
Well, it's a happening, so we'd say it's worth the trip.
Since it was in Vancouver, it would be an important part to see because it's something you'll remember for the rest of your life. $25 fine.
For some, the summit has been more annoying than historic. For instance, people who parked on the motorcade route last night discovered this morning their cars had been towed away.
Totally disrupted my whole morning. I had a doctor's appointment, and it was terrible.
No justice on stolen land! Free all American political prisoners!
For others, this weekend is no mere inconvenience. A coalition of protest groups, angry with U.S. and Russian policies, marched through the downtown, far away from the summit meeting. Meanwhile, across town at the airport, there was a much happier reception. Kyle got close, but didn't get a chance to meet either president. His reaction to this brush with greatness?
I wanted to shake his hand a lot, but I was still honored to go. It was a great experience.
Access to the leaders will remain very limited for the rest of the weekend, but their itineraries have been widely publicized. And some people plan to wait patiently along motorcade routes to try to see a president up close. Ian Hannamansing, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your BC.ca/BC.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace, installing the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
Johanna Wagstaffe is away tonight, so Amy Bell has her BC-wide weather forecast. A pleasant enough day across the south coast. Amy, what do we get next?
Yeah, it wasn't a bad day, Dan. We did have a few little showers, some instability. So we saw that just popping up sort of late morning and into the early afternoon. We do have a chance of some showers coming again in the overnight hours. And then tomorrow, not a bad day at all, especially in the first half. We will start off with a bit more sunshine than we're going to end up. But yeah, after a couple of dry days, we are heading into some wet weather by the end of the week. So we've kept the sunshine for today and for the most part for tomorrow. Tomorrow will definitely be a bit of a transition day, and we will start to see some clouds rolling in around the lunchtime hour and then more clouds throughout the day. You can see, though, this is what it's ahead of. We've got a lot of rain heading our way, significant amounts, in fact, as we head through into the weekend. So at this point, looking further ahead, I would suspect that having your Easter egg hunt indoors is probably the best bet, because if not, you're going to have a very wet Easter bunny out there. So we'll see this massive system arriving. That will bring rain, significant rainfall on Thursday, especially heavy on Friday, and it will continue to generate some snow in the very northern parts of the province and then just continue to make its way across. But you can see it is big and it packs a lot of punch, and there is another system waiting just behind it. So those successive systems will continue to funnel that wet weather into us right through the weekend, unfortunately, for that long Easter weekend. Tomorrow, though, on the island, you will still see some showers for areas around Comox and Tofino. Everywhere else, though, looking at sort of predominantly clouds by the end of the day, but starting off a lot brighter. We'll see some more rain for Prince Rupert and Port Hardy, but gorgeous through the Okanagan and the interior. So that will be a nice break before we head into the rain. As I mentioned, though, it will be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and at this point Sunday that we are looking at a lot of rain with a few breaks in between. So soak up that sunshine while you can tomorrow. We'll see that rain arriving overnight. At least the temperatures getting milder as we head through into the weekend. We'll be up to about 12 degrees.
Okay, thanks very much, Amy. And that is your late news for Tuesday. Thank you for joining us tonight. For news anytime, check our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That begins tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock. Have a good night.